listening to that is the independent elections analyst, Michael Atkins. Michael, good afternoon to you. Okay, I expect that there will be arguments around the law to come, but as you understand the law, can Jacob Zuma, the former president, really go back to Parliament? Even if people wanted him, could he even be president after serving for 9 years?
The Constitution is reasonably plain, as you indicated. You gave the reasons, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of wiggle room in those descriptions. Certainly, the Electoral Court is highly unlikely to depart from the interpretation of the law that you have given. If there are arguments that go beyond that, that are more subtle or deeper or broader, then that would have to land up, in my view, in the Constitutional Court. And it's unclear that this can happen within the time frame. So I'm not seeing a way within electoral law, within the Constitution, for Mr. Zuma to assume a seat in the National Assembly.
Does it rely on an objection? Let me just go back a little bit. As I understand it, you understand it better than I do, is that the Electoral Commission has today published the lists of candidates for political parties to lodge objections. And I presume this is one of the grounds that a political party could lodge an objection on. I think also the Chief Electoral Officer can also lodge their own objection, which is interesting. But does it rely on an objection? If no one makes an objection, could he then go to Parliament?
But if nobody made an objection, you are correct, he would remain on the candidate list. However, the law doesn't say that if you're on a candidate list, you can go to Parliament. The Constitution says you may not be a member of the legislature, the National Assembly. So even if Mr. Zuma were to remain on the candidate list and were to go through the election process, at the point that members of Parliament were being sworn in, the new Speaker of Parliament, well, I suppose the members would be sworn in by the Judge President. At that point, he should not be allowed to be sworn in, according to the law as we understand it. And if there is no objection now, and there's no objection when that swearing in happens, then anybody could approach the courts after that to have a person wrongly appointed to the National Assembly removed.
Okay, that makes sense then. So there is now this objections period. How do the objections work? I presume you can't just go and say, I don't like this person from this political party and therefore they can't be a candidate. You would need something a little bit more than that.
Yes, there are several grounds that are listed, as we know. The ground of the having been sentenced to a prison term of more than a year within the last 5. There's others. There's unrehabilitated, insolvent. You know, there's various criteria. And, for example, let's say somebody was on the list who wasn't on the voters' roll, just for example. There are those grounds, and any objection submitted must clearly specify the reason for the objection, along with any necessary information. The IEC will then make a ruling on that within a short period. And then anyone who is unhappy with the IEC's ruling may then appeal to the Electoral Court, again within a short period thereafter.
Okay, and the fact that the Chief Electoral Officer, as I understand it, can also make their own objection, that's quite interesting. I don't know if that's happened before.
I can't tell you what the processes within the IEC have been in the past, but it is necessary because it could happen that the Commission is aware of a particular problem and there could be a need for them to act proactively rather than wait for perhaps an objection that doesn't arrive or is not properly motivated. So as the custodian of the proper functioning of the process, the Chief Electoral Officer, it is quite reasonable for him to be able to do so.
It's quite a short period of time. I mean, there are hundreds of candidates. There's the candidates for Parliament, there are the candidates for the provincial legislatures, and all of the political parties don't have much time to go through all of them and then actually list their objections. I was quite surprised by how tight it is.
The timing is normal. You're correct, it's tight, but because the focus is here, we all know the process. It's clear the timetable was published long in advance. So anybody who has a concern will be busy scrutinizing those lists as we speak. So while it is tight, I don't see that there is any great democratic deficit that is going to accrue because of the short period.
The Electoral Commission said today, as it published the list, that in fact 42 candidates were on the list of more than one party. And then there were some people who were on party lists as a candidate and also running as independents. And I mean, I kind of want to say to all of them, you do have to make a decision one way or another. How does the Electoral Commission deal with those cases? I was amazed there are so many.
Well, it's, again, not a new phenomenon at all. And given the changes in the electoral law and some of the uncertainty in court cases, it's also not terribly surprising that somebody registered as an independent candidate while also being on a party list. Essentially, if there are duplications, it's up to the parties what they want to do. Of course, for the candidate themselves, they could find themselves removed by both parties. So, you know, those dynamics are difficult to say in terms of what will play out within the parties. But it's essentially up to the party bosses to decide what to do with any of those cases.
It seems to me, and I made this point speaking to Judge Jan Krichler about an hour ago now, that we're probably going to see more pressure on the Electoral Commission and, I suspect, on the Electoral Court than we've ever seen before. And this is not because of anything the IEC or the Electoral Court has done. This is only because of the nature of our politics, because these are elections which are so competitive for the first time. Do you think the system as a whole is just going to come under a lot more pressure than it's used to?
It is certainly going to come under pressure. But we must remember that the IEC came through a horrendous challenge in the build-up to COVID with the court cases, the reopening of registration of candidates. So they have, this is, if I can say, a battle-hardened leadership. And in that sense, yes, they're under a lot of pressure. They should be able to take us through without major mishaps. There are additional challenges like the extra ballot papers. You know, there's various factors that, you're correct, will put pressure on them. But so far they have come through every major test.
Michael Atkins, thank you. An independent elections analyst. Really do appreciate the time today.